Hey guys, Harrison1 back at it once again with a brand new video for you. Welcome to a new series, which I have no idea what to even name yet. Listen to the whole video, and if you can come up with a better name than I can, feel free to pass it on. I'll give you full credit for it on a future video if you can manage it. But basically, in case you guys don't know, let me give you a bit of a backstory here. In case you guys don't know, I'm a writer in my spare time. I do a bit of paid journalism as well. I write for Operation Sports. I do FIFA over there, but I like to write a lot in my spare time and write opinion blogs and things like that. And for a university project as part of my semester, I had to write about a subject as a blog basically and run it for a couple of months. And I chose Formula 1 because that's just easy for me to write about, really. You know, my lecturer was like, "Oh, but Dre, this is your chance to do something different." Which our response was, "Yeah, but I want to do well as well." See, so I chose Formula 1, and you know, just something I've always kind of had a thought about in my mind, and that was ranking drivers. Because as a sports buff and as a guy that watches a lot of sport, these ranking things always come up in all walks of life, like who are the top 5 strikers in the world, who are the top 5 football players in the world, or who are the people, at times people have asked me, who do you think, Dre, who's your greatest top 5 drivers of all time, or who is your all-time favorite 5 drivers or whatever. And I get that all the time. I get asked that on Ask FM and on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter and whatnot. And because I'm an opinionated YouTuber who likes to think of these videos as more like feature pieces now and again, I thought I would focus on the Elite 4. In my opinion, in Formula 1, there is an elite class of driver. There are 4 drivers, in my humble opinion, that are a shade better than everybody else in the field. And those 4 guys are, in no particular order, Sebastian Vettel, Kimi Räikkönen, Lewis Hamilton, and the focus of this video, Fernando Alonso. In my opinion, those 4 guys are a little bit better than everybody else in the field. And to be fair, that second tier is pretty close as well. I'm talking about guys like Nico Rosberg, Felipe Massa when he was in his prime, Mark Webber, Jenson Button, Nico Hülkenberg, etc. But to me, that's my Elite 4. So I thought I would do a video mini-series in the build-up to the new season to talk about the Elite 4, what separates them, what differences there may be, and how I see them on the track. And of course, it gives you guys a chance to chime in as well. I always love hearing what you guys have to say on these things. So let's focus on, well, I'll let the fans choose which one I wanted to do first. And you guys chose Fernando Alonso, or as many people on YouTube like to think, my arch nemesis. First up, let's break up Alonso's key stats, because I like numbers. I'm a stats man, you know that. As of time of recording, he's been in 217 races, a very special part of the 200 club, which is a pretty exclusive club as it is in Formula 1. He is a double world champion, as I'm sure many of you already know. 2005 and 2006 were his 2 world championship years. He has 32 wins, which I believe is 5th or 6th on the all-time list. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I think he's around that kind of Mansell kind of number. 32 wins all-time, 95 podiums, very close to 100 on that one, 22 pole positions, 21 times he's finished with the fastest lap. His first win was the 2003 Hungarian Grand Prix. It was the first time they actually renovated the track to make the front straight a bit longer, and they made the first corner a bit tighter. But that was his first career win. He led all but 1 lap, and he was actually the youngest race winner in Formula 1 history, and that record stood for 5 years until Sebastian Vettel broke it by winning the Italian Grand Prix in 2008 at the age of 21. Also, he had the record for being the youngest world champion ever, until Hamilton and Vettel broke that record twice as well. It just goes to show you that Formula 1 is increasingly becoming a young man's game. But Alonso was part of that incredible rookie class of 2001 that included him and Kimi Räikkönen, 2 ridiculously talented drivers and 2 of the greatest ever, in my humble opinion. Even though in his first season he was beaten by Tasso Marquez, but I'm sure many of you will kind of ignore that. I'm joking, Alonso fans, put your pitchforks away, it was a joke, haha, leave it. But, it happens to the best of us. And I appreciated Fernando Alonso early on. He was ultimately the guy that I think, in my opinion, brought forth the modern era of Formula 1. Beforehand, we were treated, in inverted commas, to 5 years of Schumacher dominance. 2000 to 2004 was the Ferrari years. It was the combination of the Red Baron in his scarlet red Ferrari winning almost everything. He even got a little bit of the lucky breaks, like in 2003 when Raikkonen just missed out by a couple of points. But it was 5 years of Michael Schumacher on top, and in 2005, the FIA changed the rules so you had to go the entire race on a single set of tyres. And that was also the year where Renault, who produced one of the greatest Formula 1 cars I've ever seen, that Renault car was unreal. It was finally something that could challenge the Ferrari head-to-head over a course of a season, and convincingly beat it at a lot of tracks. You know, and Alonso was the poster boy for that. He was this young, excited, you know, charismatic Spaniard who was able to come in, you know, establish himself quite early on, and you know, rein the neck of that car. And it was a fantastic car, and it was a great guy. It was a nice, fresh-faced winner. Something Bernie Ecclestone would love to see happen now. But like I said, it was Alonso that I think paved the way for a lot of younger drivers coming up through the ranks. Lewis Hamilton a couple of years later, Felipe Massa was becoming a big star. Kimi Raikkonen was already around. He was the established guy as well, but he was maturing and reaching his prime. Sebastian Vettel a couple of years later as well, but Alonso quickly established himself as the new king, the ushering in this new era of Formula 1. And I thought that was exciting. It was a good time to watch. And after Alonso won his two, things got really interesting because he left Renault to join McLaren. And this is something I really do appreciate and respect about Fernando Alonso, is that he wasn't satisfied with two. He wanted to challenge himself and push himself to another level by going around to different teams and winning it with more than one team. And a lot of people, I know a lot of F1 fans seem to rate a driver's ability by his ability to win by more than one car, because ultimately Formula 1 is a sport where a lot of the time the best car seems to win. So to win with more than one, I can see why people would think it's something that is definitely considered more valuable. You know, the last four guys to have done that: Alain Prost, Michael Schumacher, Nelson Piquet did it with Brabham and Williams. Niki Lauda did it with Ferrari, and then McLaren towards the end of his career. I think it was 84, I think, with Lauda or something like that. Yeah, he went to McLaren in 2007. It didn't work out. He was I've heard a lot of conflicting stories about why Alonso didn't work out at McLaren. Some say it was Ron Dennis and his leaning towards Lewis Hamilton, who was considered this prodigal child of Ron Dennis, this golden boy wonder kid that Lewis Hamilton was. And you know, he did have the aura of that when he first came in. Obviously the famous, I think it was Hungary incident, where Alonso parked in his box so that Hamilton couldn't get a second qualifying lap in, and that upset a lot of people and it caused a lot of controversy. And you know, Alonso was gone a year late, you know, just after 1 year. To be fair, it's not the first driver Ron Dennis is pissed off, because look at guys like Montoya as well, another guy that was driven out of McLaren. But again, I think that's more down to Montoya's character, or lack of it, so to speak. Went back to Renault, was a big incident in Crashgate in 2008, which didn't help him very much either. You know, Nelson Piquet Jr. spinning off into a wall, causing a safety car, which would keep Alonso in front, and got him his first win with the new era Renault cars in 2008. The orange and white rather than the blue and yellow, which made them so synonymously famous. Didn't really work out there. Then went to Ferrari in 2010. Obviously coming off the back of the Felipe Massa accident. It was, you know, Alonso was back at his best, you know, and what I can always commend about Fernando Alonso is his ability to build a team around him, and his ability to extract the absolute maximum out of a car that was built for him. I don't know how much the Ferrari car really was built for him in the end, because, you know, they advocated somewhat towards Felipe Massa as well, especially coming back after his accident in 2009. But time and time again, Fernando Alonso has gotten the best out of, you know, a substandard car. I don't think he's had the best car on the field in Formula 1 since 2007 with McLaren, and that car didn't even count because it was in breach of the rules because of Spygate. So McLaren could have had a Constructors title, but they broke the rules that year, so they didn't have one. And since then, he's always been scrapping around with cars that weren't the best. There's always been a car that's been a little bit better. In 2010, it was close, but Red Bull eventually came out on top. They had 2 drivers up in the points every race, pretty much, except maybe Turkey. 2011, Red Bull was dominant, pretty much out of the box, and throughout the entire season. 2012 was more interesting. That's a lot of year that I think a lot of people went over the top on Fernando, and I think the reason was because he was the scrapper. We had already come off the back of 2 Sebastian Vettel World Championships, one of them ridiculously dominant, a season where he won 11 times, I think had 15 pole positions, was on the front row to start 17 times that season, and the only guy that was even coming close was Jenson Button, and even then he was a distant second place by the time the second half of the season rolled around. So it was compelling. It made for a good story. Seeing Alonso succeed and do well will be good for everybody, and that's what it did. 2012 was one of the best seasons ever, I think, for Formula 1. And, the first half we had the different winners, but in the second half it was Alonso versus Vettel. And Fernando Alonso was so consistent that year in a car that was panned early on for being a donkey after it was struggling in Australia, and Felipe Massa was doing awful in it, and people were calling for his head. Like, bring in Perez immediately, and that obviously didn't work out in the end. But I think the thing with Alonso is, and why I call him the people's champion, is because he's a scrapper, he's a fighter. He's not been the best qualifier in Formula 1, especially in the more modern era in cars that don't have ultimate pace like the modern day Ferrari does. They've never been strong qualifiers, Ferrari, in recent years. But as a result, that gives Alonso more to do, and the fact he's a lightning starter is one thing that's definitely a plus. Off the line, the Ferraris are insane. Twinned with Alonso's brilliant racecraft, they can often get some incredible starts and make up for what could be a substandard or bad qualifying session. Prime example, Spain this past season, where he overtook Hamilton and Raikkonen off the opening lap and would go on to dominate that Spanish Grand Prix. He is an incredible starter, and that often can help him out a lot of the time as well. That twin with, I'd argue, Fernando Alonso has probably got the best racecraft in the field today. He spends a lot of his time, fighting other elite drivers like a Hamilton, like a Webber, a Felipe Massa, maybe a Nico Hülkenberg, a Raikkonen, a Grosjean. He has to deal with those guys more constantly than, say, Sebastian Vettel, who a lot of the time has the luxury of being able to start from the front row because he's such a good qualifier, and the Red Bulls have always been pretty strong around one lap of a racetrack. So I think that's a lot of the reason why people will gravitate more towards him. He's definitely a lot more passionate, he's a lot more out there, I think, than Sebastian is in terms of personality and character, and just in general. I come from Britain, where, I don't know how about you guys who are watching, but in Britain, sports-wise, we like an underdog. We like a guy like a Tim Henman, who was never that great at tennis. He was a fighter, he was a scrapper, and people liked it when he did well. So we would get behind a guy like Tim Henman. A bit like Andy Murray now, until he finally started winning some Grand Slams. We like an underdog, we like a fighter, we like a scrapper, a guy that that will claw his way through the field and make it look like he's really earning a championship, rather than a guy like Seb, who has been blessed with the best car. Pretty much half of his career he's had the best car in Formula 1 in or around that kind of area. Fernando Alonso hasn't had that same luxury in recent years. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that Ferrari in 2012 was anywhere near as bad as the media like to make out it was, but, media likes to have column inches, the media likes to generate their own stories because it sells more papers, and it gets more people to click links. So you've got to remember that with how the media operate. The only thing that really matters to them is who's actually reading them and how many people are actually reading them, rather than any actual integrity or quality. But you know what? I have a ton of respect for Fernando for that. A lot of people seem to think I hate his guts because I'm a Vettel fan. Quite the opposite. I have a lot of respect for Fernando, and you know, I can appreciate the fact that he tries so hard to win with other teams to cement his legacy, because ultimately that's what it's all about. I think if Fernando retired tomorrow, he'd be a top 10 driver of all time, probably towards the lower end of that top 10, but I still think he'd be a top 10 to 15 greatest driver of all time with 2 world championships. He's a 3-time runner-up as it is. I could argue he might even be a 5 or 6-time world champion if it wasn't for Sebastian Vettel's rise to fame. I think one of my friends on a video of mine commented one time that he was 7 points away from being a 5-time champ. And that's how close he has been in recent years. He was 3 points away in 2012. He was a couple points away that year in 2007 when Kimi Räikkönen ended up winning the World Championship. So Alonso's, I think, his consistency and him being around the top for such a long time is, I can see why he's a debatable #1 pound for pound guy. But you also have to wonder as well, is his time running out? Because he's 32 years old. And this is when you start to enter the twilight of your career now, where you might see certain drivers start to fade. If you look at the list of older champions, the buck kind of stops after about 33, 34, 35 years of age. Schumacher's last title came at 35. Damon Hill's only title came at 36. So you have to wonder, anything beyond that kind of age, especially in modern day F1, which is more of a younger man's game, like I said earlier, means that, you know, it could be difficult for him to keep up with some of the younger drivers that are coming up through the field. Like, I think Nico Rosberg is entering his prime. I think Hülkenberg is a great level driver as well. Seb is still only 26 years old. Hamilton's in his prime now at 29. You see what I mean? So you have to wonder, is his time starting to run out? Is he running out of time to win that elusive 3rd title? You know, Fernando's always spoken greatly about guys like Lauda and Prost that have won with 2 different teams, and I think if he could win with 2 different teams and be a 3-time champion, I think he'd definitely be a top 6 or 7 driver of all time instead of around the 10 to 15 kind of mark, especially amongst the eyes of the public, at least anyway. But let me know what you guys think of Fernando Alonso. Is he your pound for pound #1 driver? I know a lot of people are going to say yes to this, because a lot of people always seem to tell me that. But I think it's 1A and 1B between him and Sebastian. I mean, in the Elite 4 tier, I have him second, like my top 10 video I did a few months ago. But it's pretty much 1A and 1B. You could interchange Sebastian and Fernando, and I don't think anybody would really complain. I think those two are definitely noticeably better, I think, than Hamilton and Räikkönen, and I think those two are very, very, very close. But I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And oh, one more thing, who would you want me to take on next? Hamilton, Räikkönen, or Vettel? I'd love to hear you guys, as always, with your opinions on this, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and leave a like if you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys next time. This may be the kindest I've ever been to Fernando Alonso. And also, by the way, he is also the all-time points leader at 1,606, which is something you've got to bear in mind as well. That's a nice little feather in the cap to hang on. But yeah, I've been Harrison101. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys next time. Sayonara.